Welcome to Go Bank Yourself, where we break down how to grow and control capital like a banker. I'm your host, Dovi Herman, joined by my co-host, Pinny Levy. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to Go Bank Yourself, brought to you by Real Change Financial. Here today we got, coming back of course, Josh, Pinny, Levy. How's it going, Josh?
Yo, yo.
And our first guest, our esteemed agency owner who brought Pinny into the business. What was it, 6, 7 years ago plus?
13, 14 years ago.
Yeah. 13, 14
12,
years
13 years ago, something like that.
And someone who I've had the honor and pleasure of learning a lot from so far in the brief time that we've known each other. People have asked when we're going to start bringing guests on, or if we're ever going to start bringing guests on. So now is the time, and we thought that it would be a great idea to have our first guest be an industry giant, someone who's been doing this for longer than I've been alive, for sure. I don't know the exact year. You'll get more into your story, Ken, or we try to stick to our Hebrew names here. So we have Pinny and Akiva Shapero. Akiva.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi,
guys.
Yes. Welcome. So I did want to start it off with a question. I want to hear a lot of your story. Tell our guests who you are and how you got started in the financial services industry.
Okay. Good question. I was previously in a different profession altogether, which was being an early member of the Apple computer team in the late 70s. And as we progressed with Apple during the 80s and became successful, we, meaning myself and many of my compatriots, and then in 1991, I decided that was a great run and it was time to consider doing something else. So I thought I would get into the financial advisory business because one of the things I noticed about my time at Apple is that here was people like myself and my compatriots being very successful in our positions in our professional life, and yet personally, from a financial point of view, we all knew nothing and nobody ever called on us. I didn't know one single thing about life insurance, about stocks and bonds or 401ks or IRAs, nothing, and so did my compatriots. So I decided I was going to jump into this as a way to kind of help people like myself, kind of like people who were sort of in the counterculture. And I found out two things. One was I really wasn't helping them because the way they train you to be a traditional financial advisor is how you can help yourself more than you help your clients. Oh yeah, we talk a good game, but really it's about assets under management and how much money you make having those assets under management. And since all we're really doing is pushing risk, there's really not any end result that you can hang your hat on, except for risk. And I never was very comfortable with that. In the year 2000, I was at an investment seminar put on by Franklin Templeton Mutual Funds. And the keynote speaker was a gentleman who started off his speech by saying, I'm going to show you how to divorce yourself with your financial welfare from Wall Street, the government, and banks. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, except that it drew my attention and I wanted to hear about it. And as he spoke, I kept wondering to myself, why in the world would Franklin Templeton invite someone to speak on this subject? It shows you how really dumb they are, these guys are. They don't even really go in and look closely at who they're inviting and what they're going to say. And this gentleman who spoke was Nelson Nash, who, as many of us know, became the founding thought agent for the infinite banking concept. which is what he was talking about, how to use specially designed mutual participating whole life insurance as a bank. How in the world could you do that? And it intrigued me. It took me a number of years to really figure it out because I had been really pushed into the traditional financial world and kept looking for ways to do that. Plus, as many of you might know, if you read your history books, it's probably not in the history books, life insurance and whole life in particular is looked at as a demon in the financial industry, as a bad investment, as a
Yeah.
rip-off by greedy life insurance agents and so forth. So it was a hard story to tell. Little by little, we were able to get some headway. We were able to create relationships with some good, solid mutual life insurance companies, and they became our partners. There's 5 of them. And we created a nonprofit organization called the Infinite Banking Institute, which is now called the Nelson Nash Institute in memory of Nelson, since he passed away about 5-6 years ago. And we've made that institute as a nonprofit educational organization to financial advisors who want to learn how to implement infinite banking, because as people read Nelson's books and other books by other authors about infinite banking, consumers are intrigued by it as well and see it as a powerful financial tool that they want to have, but they need to have a way to implement it. And so that's kind of where we are today. We're implementers. We don't go around pushing things on people. We know that there's only a certain percentage of people that are open-minded to things like infinite banking, because most people don't want to change. And we have learned to respect that, because you don't need to beat up people. If they aren't open and aren't ready to change, then we let them be. And I think people appreciate that. I've had people say to me, "This isn't for me," but I appreciate your talking to me in a way that is respectful and so forth. And then I've gotten a referral from them, someone who did become a client, from a prospect who didn't want to be a client. So you never know.
We've talked about we've talked about or made podcast episodes about the who's likely to be drawn to this or find the worth in this, the subjective type, not just the math. The math is math, but is it the rugged individualism? Is it the anti-regulation? The little spark of chutzpah of
Contrary.
contrarian, right? They say sit down and you want to stand up. Well, if that's you in any way, or and that can even translate to, if they say line up and take this brand new medical experiment, if you're the type to say maybe I'm not going to do what the conventional wisdom says, then you may have the founding stuff within you that makes you a candidate for this, because it is not the it doesn't have the approbation of the 50-pound heads on Wall Street, because it doesn't fall into what Akiva just spoke about, it being the traditional financial advisor.
Yeah, we did touch on that in the
Right.
very same episode. Akiva, I want to bring you back to your early days in Wall Street as a financial advisor when you were first
Okay.
starting out. What was it that you were being taught to best serve your clients? What were you selling? How were you bringing them to the table?
Yeah.
What were you advising them to do?
Yes, it's a good question. It's hard for me to divorce what I was taught and what I know today, because they're two separate things. But what I was taught was the financial world revolves around mutual funds. And I was basically taught that stocks and bonds are the essence of mutual funds, of course, and they're wonderful, but the average guy in the street is not really going to be able to participate in buying stocks and bonds because they don't have the money and maybe they don't have the expertise. So we're going to present to them the expertise of mutual fund managers who have designed these mutual funds and will put you in a good place to live because you're diversifying. So that was the basic essence. And then, of course, I was taught that there needs to be protection for your family, so you should always try to sell term. Really wasn't taught much about permanent life insurance until very shortly after I got in the business. Veritable universal life came along, which was life insurance where the premiums are invested in mutual funds. They were called separate accounts, but it's the same thing. And so really, that was just a variation of the same thing I was being taught at the beginning, wasn't I? And history has shown us that veritable universal lives have been very, very bad for customers. And I can go into that, but it's a different subject. But that's kind of what I was taught.
It's a different subject. Would you want to go into it? I'm very curious. We don't
About
have to.
veritable universal life?
Yeah.
Well, veritable universal life is just another, pardon my pun being the pun, but is just another variation of universal life. And universal life, in difference to whole life, is two separate products packed into one. They are a annual renewable yearly term product and a separate account that acts somewhat like an annuity, which, if it's just straight universal life, is based on whatever the interest rates are. If it's a veritable universal life, it's based on how well the mutual funds you have chosen. And both of those things have one thing in common, and that is the risk is on you. Whereas whole life, the guarantees are actuarially backed by the company, and so the risk is on the company.
You said that it's been shown that variable universal life has been very poor for clients.
Yes, because when you have a bad year, or let's just take an event like 1981 to 84 where you had 3 bad years, the premium that you bought in for, let's say you bought in for a $500 a month premium to get you $300,000 of life insurance, and that after the annual renewable term is paid for, the rest will go into these separate accounts or mutual funds, as we call them. If you have 3 bad years in a row, you're going to get a letter, as everyone did in those days. You're going to get a letter from the insurance company saying, I'm sorry, because of the poor performance of your separate accounts, to keep your insurance policy from lapsing, you're going to need to put in $1,100 a month. Okay, so that ended up being very terrible for the average client, because the average client can't automatically budget for $1,100 when $500 is what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so needless to say, the insurance industry took another black eye because these things just didn't work. And same with universal life. In the early 80s, we were illustrating, I wasn't part of that world yet, but the advisors were illustrating universal life at, ready, 18% a year.
Heard that.
Okay? And then by 1984, they were told to illustrate it 5%. Okay? So what do you think happened to the people who were told you can put in $300 a month and you're going to have a great policy at 18%, and now it's at 5%? Okay?
$1,200 a month.
What'd you say?
I said $1,200 a month.
Yeah. So
those policies probably lapsed.
Yeah. Now, today we have a newer product called the Index Universal Life, and that just suffers from the same problem, although it's a little bit less vulnerable to the market because they're buying options on the stock market, on indices on the stock market. And if the stock market doesn't perform in a given year, they just don't exercise the option and you don't lose any money. But they have to cover themselves on the front end by having caps or participation rates. And those keep going down, down, down. When IULs first came out, we were allowed to illustrate at 17% a year.
That's nuts.
Okay? Now, those are the same indices now, 20 years later, same indices, but now you're only allowed to illustrate it, I think 6.5 or 6%. And so you're really not that far off from just buying whole life, except with whole life you get to sleep at night. Okay? So
Hmm.
IULs are, they have their own situation, and I'm just not involved in those because I'm not selling risk. To me, risk, I'm a proponent of risk. Risk in yourself.
You know
Have a
what's
whole life policy, build up cash, borrow money from your policy to start your own business based on your intellect, your ability, your challenges, your ability to deal with risk and go forward. That's where I come in.
Hmm.
Because when you put your money in risk on the stock market, which is what mutual funds are, you have no idea what any of it's based on. I mean, today Trump announced we're waiting another week before we bomb Iran. The market went down 5% because of that. Let me see. The market went down 5%. Let me see. Let's ask a question. Is Brown and Foreman Bourbon Company is a publicly held company? How does waiting a week to bomb Iran have to do with bourbon, and yet it went down 5%? You see what I'm saying? So you can't control any of that. And I'm not saying that the stock market doesn't make money, but one of my mentors is a gentleman named Nick Murray. Is one of my mentors, and yet all he has to do is he's a traditional financial advisor, but at least he's got his head screwed on right when it comes to traditional financial advising. And his main message, and it's a good message for all of us in the financial profession, his main message is your job is to talk your client out of constantly wanting to change positions. Now, we don't suffer from that as much as people that buy stocks and bonds and mutual funds. But we still don't want people constantly, it's not obviously not good to change from one insurance company to another just because you found out one of them has a higher rating or something like that. But in the traditional financial world, he has shown that you take any 30-year period from 1950 to 2026, any 30-year snapshot, and the stock market will return between 10 and 11% every time, as long as you don't keep changing your positions. And so he has a good message. It's very sound. And I just, anytime I read about anybody who has common sense, I want to hear what they have to say, even if it's not in my specific profession. And then we have another mentor. Lynn Renier is a great mentor of mine. He made a statement. He said, in the life insurance industry, we have a term called net amount at risk. And that is the amount between your cash value and the actual death benefit. So let's say you have a $300,000 death benefit, $100,000 in cash. The net amount at risk is $200,000, correct? That's the amount the insurance company is going to pay out of their pocket because they're going to keep the $100,000. They'll pay $300,000. They made $100 on the deal, but they got to pay $200 out of that. So that $200,000, that net amount of risk, is an asset. That's a financial asset, and you got that financial asset based on your good health. When you apply for life insurance, you're asking them to provide you an asset for the future, a financial asset. It's real money, but it's there for the future. It's a gift of love to someone in your family. Dovi, your head needs to go up and down so I know that you follow me.
Yes, I follow you.
Am I talking to someone who's just smoked a bong or something?
Well, I do live in LA.
Huh?
I said, well, I do live in LA.
I don't live in LA, bro. I live in Florida. We smoke palm trees. And these are things that we want to take in and explain to our clients. Because forget all the rhetoric about whole life being a bad investment or being a scam. Just ignore that. get into the positive side of what we can provide to our client base. And that is a absolutely 100% free asset based on your good health. That's an amazing thing when you think about it. When you think about, here we are today, 2026, Dovi Herman's 34 years old. How old are you, Dovi?
30.
Well, that's close enough. He's 30 years old, and he has to ask himself, do I really care about being healthy? You know, when I was in Boston a couple weeks ago at a Lafayette conference, they had a guest speaker. He was a long-distance runner, and he'd been running for years. He'd done something like 200 marathons. I mean, that's a serious runner, correct?
Yeah.
And his doctor, he goes in for a physical, and his doctor says, you got 2 blocked arteries. He said, how can that be? And he said, the doctor said, just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy.
Mm.
How do you eat? How do you take care of yourself? And he found out he didn't do anything. All he did was just practice running, you know. So we have that opportunity, all of us, to make that into a financial asset for free. It's for free, no cost. And then when you match it with the infinite banking concept, where you're creating cash as a living benefit, a living asset that you can use to grow your world, tell me something that comes close to that. Tell me a financial product that could do all that. Well, it doesn't get a very good return on investment. Well, let me see. Let's just say it's 4% internal rate of return. Plus, you got that $200 million, $2 million free asset on top of it. So now you have to turn around and say, don't do an internal rate of return on the cash value. Do an internal rate of return on the death benefit. And you will see that it's a really good investment. You just don't get to have all the money right now. But who said you should? Who said you have to have that? Go out and buy a Ferrari, waste your time. I was watching some shorts on YouTube, and there's this young man, probably about your age, Dovi, who's a buyer for a watch and jewelry store. You ever seen those? And people come in to sell their Rolex, and they're almost all gangbangers. If someone had given them some financial education, they would have never gone out and bought a Rolex, you know, because they did a drug deal or God knows what else. And then whatever goes up goes down, and they have to sell their Rolex, and they get all nasty to this poor kid who's paying them good money for it because it's not good enough. Because they don't see the value of all the financial assets that are available to us in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
So just sharing that. Maybe got off on a tangent, but it's good
No,
information.
the tangent's great. I feel like I don't even have to ask you any questions because you just go from thought to thought. You're asking yourself your own questions and then answering them.
Yeah, I've been told that. Yeah. Sometimes it's known as a blabbermouth, but it can also be some good stuff too.
Great stuff.
These are different angles that I bring in because you know what? Whenever you're talking to a client, they could throw a punch at you that, you know, catches you off guard, and it still happens to me. But the more you look at all the different aspects from an intelligent point of view instead of a reactive point of view, how can I get this across to someone who thinks whole life is a scam? That's the exact wrong way to prepare yourself for a client. The best way is to prepare what is good about it, what is awesome about it, what is something you want to expand your financial education, your literacy about it, or as Marty Smith says, whole life, mutual participating whole life is the Swiss Army knife of financial products.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's probably not as sharp as a Japanese steel 4-inch blade, you know, or probably doesn't work as well on a Phillips screw as a electric drill, but it can do all those things, you see. So another thing comes to mind. I did have a client once who's talking to me, and as we did, they were very forthcoming in fact finding. Not everybody is, and I respect that. And she told me she'd never been married. She was about 58 years old, in good health. She worked in Manhattan, and she had about a net worth of about $2 million, all of it in the market. So I said to her, do you have any positions in the market where a 4%, 4.5% internal rate of return or a 10% internal rate of return is absolutely guaranteed to you? And she said, no. And I said, wouldn't it make sense to have that as a base? If you've got 2 million in the market, shouldn't you have maybe participate at a rate of $50,000 a year into something like this? And she said, yes. And I said, if I told you what it was, would you still listen to me even if I said it? And it was like me telling you to put on a clown costume for Barnum and Bailey. She said, yes, I would still listen to you. And I said, well, the clown costume I'm going to ask you to put on is to consider a early high cash value whole life policy. And she goes, I'm listening, because by then I caught her attention. And also I had mentioned in the conversation, how come your guy at Merrill Lynch didn't mention this to you? Don't you think a portfolio should have a base that has no risk? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And she got a little bit like, little nuts. I mean, I didn't say he's a jerk or a ding-dong, but I said, don't you think it's kind of odd he didn't mention that? And I said, I'm going to answer why he didn't mention it, because he doesn't know how to implement it. You see, if we don't know how to implement it, we're not going to mention it, because we don't want to look like fools. And I respect that if you're a financial advisor, but I do know how to implement it. And I bet if you tell your financial advisor, he's going to tell you, well, we have someone at Merrill Lynch, is probably someone at Crump. You know who Crump is?
No.
Used to be called Bices. They were bought out by a company called Crump, and they've since been bought out by private equity, which means they're a slaughterhouse. Crump positions themselves as a IMO to about 200 life insurance companies, and they market themselves to all the stock brokerage houses like Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs, because those guys are smart enough to realize that their stockbrokers don't know crap about life insurance. The only problem is, what kind of expert knows everything about 200 different life insurance companies? It doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay? It's kind of like when I sold 401ks and I go into the cafeteria and there's 50 employees and I hand out a 32-page colorful brochure about their new 401k, your ticket to retirement, your cabin in retirement, you're living on a cruise in retirement, and let's say 16 pages, 15 pages was all glossy fluff, had nothing to do with anything that was connected to reality. You're saving for your future. And then the last page had a list of 125 mutual funds. And my job, here was my job. You ready, Dovi?
Mm-hmm.
My job was to instruct them that you can only choose 5 mutual funds, and whatever percentage you assign to them, the percentages must add up to 100. And I had about 6 people ask me, could you repeat that? Okay? Because obviously I had just stumbled upon deep math for them.
Right.
Okay? So a mutual fund has an average of 250 positions. By law, they only have to reflect, or not reflect, to make available to us the 10 top positions.
Mm-hmm.
And their reasoning is because their money managers are always buying and selling stocks. And if they had to print something with all 250, they'd have to reprint it every day. Got it?
Yes.
Okay? Now, you would take those 125 mutual funds that these people have to choose from, and they're actually going to think, hold on a minute, 25 times 250 equals 31,250 positions. And they're expecting me, and I'm expecting me too, because I've been taught to bullshit this, that I know the future value for your retirement of 31,250 positions.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay? So I'm going to ask you a question. Let's just say I was an average financial advisor in those days. let's just say take someone who was really good. They were making $2.1 million in commissions a year. That's really good. Okay? What percentage of those 31,250 positions do you think they could tell you the future of them, the next 10 to 20 years? How many of those 31,000?
That
Zero.
would be zero.
Zero. Okay? So it's all bullshit. It's all fluff and mirrors. Okay? So then they came out with target funds. Let's say someone's 45 and they're going to plan to retire at age 65, and of course we know 80% of the working class never retire at 65, but that's what we're told. So they'll get a 20-year target fund. That means it's based on your risk level for 20 years. It changes each year to reflect your risk level. Okay? Those average about 6% a year if you never change them. Why not 10%? Why not 12? Because you have to pay a higher fee to the money manager of the mutual fund because he has to do more active work. Statistics show that an index fund will always do better than a mutual fund. And yet everyone flocks to mutual funds. Not everyone, some do index funds. But even them, let's just say the S&P 500. What decides who's in that S&P 500? Popularity. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 80s when Apple was on the NASDAQ, people started writing letters to the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission. Why is not Apple on the S&P 500? So because they got so many letters, they put it on there. That's how they decide.
Just because people wanted them to be.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you see, if you're willing to go a little deeper into how this stuff works, like I was, because I guess I'm just a curious person, you start seeing what a sham it is.
So where did you find all this information that I'm sure you've accrued over many, many years, and somehow you remember so much of it? But where did you when you started digging? How did you uncover all this?
Through digging.
Through
I'm
digging.
not following you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Were there
researching.
certain books that were really illuminating to you, or websites, or podcasts, or people's blogs that you followed?
Some of it was intuition, like if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. You know, if you find yourself walking down the aisle in a grocery store and you see a client during one of the bad years, you know, when the market's not doing well,
Yeah.
and you find yourself quickly turning the corner and going down a different aisle, that's called hiding from the client, then it doesn't take much of your intuition to realize maybe you're not in the right space, or maybe you're not really helping people.
And
Get it?
I get it. I think the
So
natural
change.
pushback to that would be, well, you tell the client, well, just wait it out. The market will always recover.
Yeah. Okay, but they're angry. Do you want to have? Would you like to get phone calls from angry people? Would you just generally like that?
No.
Levy, would you enjoy that?
I would not.
No. And people put up with it because they don't know any better as to how to help people with their money, and they've been told to say the things you just said. The market will turn around, and it will, but maybe it won't turn around when you want it to.
Or needed to.
You know, in 2008, Walmart had a list, I don't know how to say it, a mile long, of people who were getting ready to retire that were applying for jobs as a greeter because they couldn't retire because they lost so much money in 2008. So is that would you like to be the person who put those people in those positions?
No, of course not.
Yeah, but that's what 95% of people in financial advisory business do. And then there's the other group that just goes strictly into the traditional life insurance. Oh, let's pick on them for a minute, okay, Dovi? You know, we have a mutual friend, Pinny and I, who works for New York Life as a career agent.
Mm-hmm.
And he's told that I don't care. We don't even care that you observe the Jewish Sabbath. You're not going home until you've done 500 cold calls for the week. Now, obviously, he's made it so he does finish up in time to get home for Shabbat. right?
Yeah.
But is that the world you want to live in, where you're just calling people cold and pressuring them to, do that? He found that doesn't work, so now he's trying disability insurance through cold calling. And that's no way. That's not creating relationships, is it? It's
No.
I sympathize with people when they get into our business when they ask, "How do I find clients?" I sympathize.
Yeah.
But when Pinny started working for me, he asked me that same question. And he may not remember the answer I gave him, but the reason I remember it is because he actually did exactly what I said, and I was actually sort of joking. You ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready for me to tell you what I told him?
Yeah.
I said, your client is 2 feet away from you. And so I'm like sitting in my office doing my work, and the phone rings. Penny's on the phone. He says, "I'm getting an oil change at Jiffy Lube, and the
Tires
guy
Plus.
willing to meet with us. What time can you meet?"
Right.
He's kind of yelling because the drill's in the background and everything. You remember those days, Penny?
I remember those days.
He'd do it again tomorrow if you had to. There's nothing
Again
wrong with
today.
it. All work is noble. Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's-
Especially when you know that you have nothing to hide here. The people that you interact with, you're truly, genuinely trying to help them. So many independent brokers are working for whatever IMO is popular that day, whether it be, that decade,
Most of them
FFL,
are- most of
PHP,
them-
WFG, and they're just pushing whatever products they're being told is gonna pay them a high commission. And sure, they may actually think that they're doing their clients right, but most of the time they can't even describe the products or strategies that they're even selling.
Well, let's be more fair. Let's go with someone who's a career agent. He works for New York Life. Okay? At least he doesn't have to pretend to know 20 different companies. He just knows the one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And of course, there is no one company that has all the answers. But he has to sell New York Life because that's where he gets his paycheck. So that's an issue too. And but you're right. You brought up something very good, and that is you have to be someone who has internalized what it is you're trying to talk about and made it your own. And so, as I'm sure you know, and Penny and I live and breathe infinite banking. We actually practice it. I have nothing. I have no stocks or bonds, no mutual funds that people would think, wow, you're 76 years old, you're a successful person, you must have a pretty good portfolio. And the answer is yes, I do, in whole life cash value. Except for my gold and silver, or as someone in Wyoming told me, gold, silver, ammunition, and sourdough starter.
Yeah, I heard you say the sourdough starter. That was a new one.
Yeah, it was a new one to me too. That was the Sens, Penny. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, but that's just in case the zombies come, right?
Right.
Self-sustainable.
The systems have gone down. But most pundits that I follow say that would only last for a month or so. We'd get, sort of like they'd go around the room and unplug all the computers, the zombies. But after a while, once we can kill them off, we go around and plug them back in, and it takes a while for things to come back up. And once they do, we're back in business selling infinite banking. But for a month or so, you better make sure you have some gold and silver and plenty of ammunition and sourdough starter, right?
And water.
Exactly.
Yeah, and all the other things. So, and hopefully that'll never happen. We'll figure it out, but doesn't hurt to be. You know what they say when Yaakov was coming back from Lavan, and one of his spies told him that Esav is coming on his way to see you, and he didn't know, was he coming to kill me or was he coming to greet me? And he told his family 3 things: prepare gifts in case he's coming to be brotherly, put poison on the tips of your arrows in case this is war, and meanwhile pray. Right? We're always in the same situation. Okay?
We're always in the same situation. How?
Well, the world looks like it's threatening to implode. And so we have our tools that we need to keep it together, and hopefully we'll be able to survive it, whatever it is. Just like Yaakov did, and he did, of course. So it's a good lesson on both the spiritual level and the physical level.
Yeah.
And by the way, I tell that same story to non-Jews, because most of the good stuff in Torah is universal to everybody. The rest of it's just particular to us, just the shenanigans we have to put up with, like eating matzah and stuff like that. But most of it's good stuff for everybody.
Yeah. Penny, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask Akiva?
I guess we can have the boss back for some more specifics. A primer for one other thing, for a different episode, because it could be a long answer. I don't want to start now. When I started this with Akiva, we looked to establish benefit plans for companies that would take existing law, IRS law for who you can provide these benefits for, and try to grow these assets inside life insurance. And I wanted to compare, contrast the lessons we learned along the way about those traditional places where business owners could think about putting their money for either tax benefit or for long-term success.
Yeah.
But only a primer. This is only a teaser.
I just would a little tease, a little peek, real quick. And I think Jeff alluded to this. As I said, I was at a business conference a couple of weeks ago with Lafayette, and they gave awards to the top this and top that. And as you'd expect, many of the top producers are very steeped in infinite banking. But you would be surprised at how many top producers were equally as steeped in tax-deductible life insurance inside pension and benefit plan, cash balance benefit plans and things like that. And so it's worth discussing the pros and cons at another date about those and where they fit in, if at all. I even had a guy tell me, I do IBC inside of cash balance plans, which is absolutely, totally impossible.
Yeah, impossible.
To me, he didn't know what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll explore that at a later date. Is that kind of what you're alluding to, Penny?
Yeah. So we're just bookmarking our place here that we're going to have you back. So
yeah, okay.
Anyway, we'll wrap up for now.
Everyone, appreciate you sticking around. Akiva, thank you for the first time you've come on. I'm sure if you're open to it, we'd love to have you as a recurring guest.
So not a problem. Love to be helpful. If you're the only one who even watches this YouTube, it'll be worth it.
You are a wealth of knowledge. I am pleasantly surprised at just how much you know about.
We've only scratched the surface.
I know. I know. The life insurance industry, the financial services industry in general. One of my favorite topics, Austrian economics. I know that's something that you are.
We can do 10 sessions on that.
Yes, I would love that.
And I'll just mention as in conclusion that I sit on the shoulders of many great mentors. It's not just self-made. It's really seeking out those who know something I don't know and wanting to learn from them. And so we'll keep on doing that from generation to generation. Okay?
Oh, man. Thank you for listening to Go Bank Yourself. To learn how to apply these strategies in your own life, email Dovi Herman at realchangefinancial.com. We'll see you in the next episode.